Sometimes the best way to understand how a legal system really works isn't to read the whole rule book. Instead, you look at one single, really strange case. And today, we're diving into an incredible story from the Buddhist scriptures. It's got a monk, a monkey, and a legal loophole so big, the Buddha himself had to step in and close it. So, right off the bat, here's a question for you. Can a sacred law even have a loophole? We tend to think of these rules as absolute, set in stone. But what happens when somebody follows the exact letter of the law while totally, completely violating its spirit? Well, that's the exact tension we're going to explore. All right, so here's how we're going to unpack this. We'll look at the monk and the monkey, the discovery, the loophole, the Buddhist reaction, the brand new rule it created, and finally, what it all tells us about how ancient law actually gets made. So, let's set the scene. We're in the Mahavana forest near the ancient city of Vesali. And deep in this forest, a particular monk is hiding a pretty shocking secret. Now, before we go any further, you need to know about the Vinaya. Think of it as the legal code for Buddhist monks and nuns. But it's not just a dry list of do's and don'ts. Almost every single rule exists because of a specific story, a specific incident that forced the rule to be created in the first place, just like the one we're about to get into. So this monk is carrying on with his secret life in the forest. But you know how it is. Secrets have a way of not staying secret for very long. One day, a group of other monks is just walking through that same forest. Suddenly, a female monkey comes up to them and starts acting, well, let's just say very strangely. The text actually says it was lifting its hips and making suggestive signs. The monks just knew something was off, so they decided to hide and wait. And sure enough, the first monk shows up, shares his food with the monkey, and then they witness the very act they feared. The secret was officially out. As you can imagine, the monks are absolutely horrified. They immediately confront him. And this is the moment the story shifts from being just about a shocking act to a really fascinating legal debate. And here's where it gets wild. The monk doesn't even deny what he did. Instead, he argues a technicality. He says, hey, the rule specifically forbids sex with human women. It says nothing about animals. He's found a loophole. The other monks are just floored. They argue back that the entire point of the rule, the spirit of the law, is to overcome lust in all its forms. So now you have a total standoff. Two completely different interpretations of the law. When that happens, there's only one thing to do. You take it to the highest court in the land. They bring the case directly to the Buddha for a final ruling. The Buddha calls the monk forward, and the monk admits to everything. But the Buddha's judgment isn't just a simple, you're wrong. Oh no. It is one of the most powerful and frankly intense rebukes in the entire Buddhist canon. The Buddha looks this monk right in the face and tells him it would have been better to put his sexual organ into the mouth of a deadly viper or into a pit of burning coals than to do what he did. I mean, wow, what a shocking and powerful image. And you have to stop and ask, right? How could that possibly be better? One leads to a guaranteed, horrible, painful death. The other, well, it doesn't seem nearly as physically damaging. What is the logic here? Well, the Buddha's logic is all about the scale of consequences. He explains that yes, a viper's bite would cause terrible pain and death, but that damage is limited to this one life. The monk's act, on the other hand, was like a spiritual poison. It would lead to a terrible rebirth, causing suffering in the next life. So for the Buddha, the long-term spiritual ruin was infinitely worse than short-term physical death. So, with the principle now crystal clear, the next step was to make sure a loophole like this could never be exploited again. The law itself had to change. And the Buddha doesn't just add a little footnote. He classifies this act as a Parajika. This word means an offense of defeat, and it's the most serious category of rule there is. If you commit a Parajika offense, you're done. You are no longer a monk. You are permanently expelled from the community. There are absolutely no second chances. And so the new rule is laid down. It's clear, it's direct, and it adds that critical phrase, even with a female animal. The loophole was officially and very publicly slammed shut. So, what does this very strange, very graphic story actually teach us? Well, it's a perfect window into how the Vinaya and a lot of ancient legal codes actually work. You can see this four-step process of how legal precedent gets made. First, you have an incident, something nobody saw coming. That leads to a debate about what the existing rules actually mean. Then, an authority,
in this case the Buddha, steps in to issue a judgment and clarify the underlying principle. And finally, that judgment creates a brand new, much more specific rule for everyone to follow in the future.
The really big takeaway here is that this ancient code was never meant to be a static, unchanging list of commands. It's a living, breathing legal system. It's designed to evolve and adapt by responding to real, messy human situations, no matter how bizarre they might be. It's a system built on case law. And that kind of leaves us with one final big question to think about. If even ancient sacred codes like this one were designed to adapt to new circumstances, what does that tell us about how we should approach historical laws and ethical systems when we try to apply them to the completely unforeseen problems of our own modern world?